Welcome, you're with IndiaPostLive.com. In an election where money is flowing like water, can candidates with meager means take on the crorepati's and take on those candidates who are being backed by big corporates? Take a look. The declaration of assets by candidates in the fray for the 2014 elections present a grim reality of the divide between the rich and poor in the country. So while the likes of Narendra Modi and Rahul Gandhi fly from one election meeting to another in chartered planes and private helicopters, the likes of Mohinder Singh, a rickshaw puller and an independent candidate from Amritsar, has to campaign in his rickshaw with one of his Punjab police bodyguards perched on it. In an election where corporates are ruling the roost by pumping in funds for different political parties, can the likes of Mohinder Singh expect a level playing field? All right, I have with me in the studio to talk about the Raja Bhoj Gangu Teli syndrome, Amitabh Behar. Amitabh Behar is Secretary of the National Social Watch. I also have with me on Google Hangout Porunjoy Guhothakurta, who is a very senior journalist and a political commentator. So thank you so much for joining the conversation. I invite all of you to join the conversation. Just log on to www.indiapostlive.com and you can send us an invite and we will take your comments as well. Send us your tweets, hashtag IndiaPostLive. All right, so let me first ask you, Amitabh, you just saw the story of this rickshaw puller who has nothing but, just one person security to, go with him as he campaigns on his rickshaw. Can he really take on all these people who use so many platforms to campaign?
I think it's quite obvious that the rickshaw puller cannot take on these people who are backed by large corporates or people who have huge resources. So in that sense, it's a completely unequal playing field. You cannot expect really a poor person to take on the rich people who are contesting, because very often the rich people also have the muscle power with them. And in fact, why take this rickshaw puller? Apologies to him, I don't know about his background, but you have, say, a Medha Patkar in the field. You have a Dayamani Barla in the field, who have tremendous support in terms of their groundwork that they've done over the years. So there are a lot of constituencies who are supporting them. Still, for them to contest in terms of a level playing field with the established, entrenched political interest and political parties is extremely difficult. So what you're looking at, unfortunately, is this complete subsuming of political power with economic elites. And that's like distorting the democratic scene in India.
Okay, let me get a comment on that from Porunjoy. Sir, you just heard what Amitabh has said. Do you think there's a flaw in democracy somewhere?
You see, the basic problem with the laws of the land is that there are two glaring loopholes in the law of the land, which make this kind of abuse of money power in elections possible. The first loophole is that while there are limits on the expenditure that an individual candidate can incur in elections, and these have been clearly specified, you can incur so much money, and there's a very well laid out in a prescribed system of submitting expenditure statements to the returning officer. The problem is there are no limits on a political party spending, and so that is where a huge amount of money gets spent. I mean, see what's happening on this occasion. You have Mr. Narendra Modi. He is the prime ministerial candidate of the Bharatiya Janata Party. The BJP has been the principal opposition party for the last 10 years. But it seems to be spending about 5 or 10 times more than what the Indian National Congress is spending, which has been in power for the last 10 years. Now, you look at, I speak in the city of Delhi, every hoarding I see Mr. Modi's face staring at me. Yes. I open any newspaper and I see he's there. I turn on to any television channel and it's Mr. Modi all the time. So this is one example of how huge amounts of money are being spent, and there's absolutely no limit on that. Which is, by the time the accounts of that political party get audited, and that too by their own favored auditor and not by an auditor, say by somebody suggested by the Controller and Auditor General of India, everything is over and done with. The second loophole, and I think this is really a bigger problem, is that most of the major political parties in this country, they show that they're receiving money in the form of donations below 20,000 rupees. Now, this is a bit of a joke. You know, the same person could be donating 19,999 100 times and it's not accounted for. So the bulk of the money that the major political parties receive, they don't even disclose the source of where this money is going to come from. So all of this leads to this kind of abuse of money power, and that is one of the reasons that this kind of nexus between business, politics, and crime, which is vitiating the whole democratic process in this country.
Vitiating the whole democratic process. I mean, do you agree with what he has just said? Don't you think that, the people with lesser resources, they don't have a level playing field really?
As in, I totally agree. As in, I agree with the question that you're posing and also what Pranjay said. But I think that two sides to the coin. One is the issue that Pranjay has raised, that how elections are funded, what is the legal regime around it.
Yes.
But the other point is also, I think, how elections are fought. What are the issues that we actually fight elections on? So it's more of personalities. You create cults around personalities, and then you're trying to fight elections around that.
Right.
The real issues are not being contested, and it's not about the politics of, say, what's going to happen to the schooling system in this country, or the question of livelihood. I've not heard these questions at all in the last six weeks. So what's happening is, how do you create a cult, a bubble around a person or maybe a party? And when you do that, you need to pump in huge resources. The real questions get lost. The questions of the common people get completely lost. And then it's really this bubble around which you have the entire election campaign. So I would also at some level say that it's about the nature of politics as well, which we need to look at, which are obviously interconnected with the issues Pranjay has raised.
Right, all right. I have with me on Google Hangout Anil Verma. Anil Verma is the head of National Election Watch of ADR. ADR, as we all know, is Association for Democratic Reforms. Anilji, thank you so much for joining the conversation. You just heard what Pranjay and Amitabh have had to say about, there not being a level playing field for candidates with lesser resources, and also the fact that there are so many loopholes in the political system, which is kind of vitiating the atmosphere, and also real issues are not being talked about. What are your views, sir?
See, firstly, there is no doubt there is no level playing field, because I can just give you the statistics of the status of the nominations which have been filed till now.
Right.
About 7,624 candidates data we have analyzed. And out of these, this is still the 8th phase. There are 2,038 crore-pratis, which is roughly 27% of the total candidates. And the average works out to rupees 4.64 crores per candidate. But let me also tell you that in each phase, there are a number of candidates who also show zero assets, or assets, 5,000, 4,000, 3,000 and all. But the basic issue is that all the major parties, all their candidates by and large are crore-pratis. I can give you the data if you wish.
Right.
But there is no doubt that money power plays an extremely important role in our elections the way they are conducted now. Muscle power has been reduced to some extent by the constant efforts of the Election Commission. But black money, the way it flows, Dr. Qureshi, one of the previous Chief Election Commissioner, after the UP elections of 2012, had made a statement that roughly 25 crores is spent on each assembly constituency. So there are 4,000 constituencies in India. That comes to 1,00,000 crores. You had 543 Lok Sabha seats, 12,500 crores. Add the Zilla, Panchayat and all the other elections.
The numbers are scary, sir. All right. All right. Let me just ask Paranjada, we were just looking at some reports, the party-wise, if you look at party-wise candidates who are crore-pratis, 94%, and this is, I'm talking the 7 phases that have already happened, 94% belong to the DMK, 82% of the Congress. Independents are 10%. You know, independent candidates are 10%. How can they really take on the, the bigger parties?
Okay, let me make 2 points. You know, I completely agree with what Amitabh and Anil have said, that the playing field is not level. And you have people with huge amounts of money who are able to, you know, splurge on their expenses. And what is actually legally disclosed is the tip of the proverbial iceberg. Because a huge amount of money gets spent in an illegal manner, and you can just gauge that this amount is huge from the kind of seizures that take place during election time, the amount of liquor that is seized, the amount of hard cash that is found, and so on and so forth. Having said this, let me also, you know, give a slightly optimistic spin to this entire story. You know, it's thanks to organizations like the Association of Democratic Reforms and the NEW, the National Electronic Watch. It's thanks to active civil society organizations. It's thanks to individuals like Amitabh that there's today more and more people are aware of what is happening. You know, the assets of the candidates are being highlighted in various media, by television channels, by newspapers. People are asking, how is it that your assets have gone up so much in the last 5 years? How is it that the same set of assets which you valued 5 years ago at a particular rate has today been valued differently, and you're showing how those assets are going up? And I also want to realize, since you mentioned DMK, you know, at some point of time, you know, you can't fool all the people all the time. You know? and the DMK and the DMK should know this. You know, DMK in the previous elections, the kind of money that was spent, you know, they were distributing color television sets to people.
Yes.
But who lost the election, wasn't it? Because people took those color television sets, and some of those people ended up watching Jaya television on those color television sets. So the whole story is, you can try and bribe everybody. You know, if you stand in the middle of the road and start doling out goodies, there'll be enough people to take it. But all I'm saying is that I don't want to sort of, you know, in any way play down the fact that money power has a terrible influence on the conduct of influence. It's subverting the democratic process. But I'm also arguing that today we are also in a society which is getting increasingly transparent. People are becoming more aware, and it's becoming that much more difficult. I mean, for political parties, if they think they can bribe everybody and buy up their votes, I think they're also fooling themselves. That's a limited point I want to make.
All right. So, okay, there is increased transparency, definitely. But also, you know, with the advent of social media and the way political parties are using the social media, especially Narendra Modi. I mean, yesterday he voted, and, you know, he clicked that selfie. That definitely would connect with the youth at so many levels. You know, he himself comes out and he clicks this. Now, how can somebody without these resources do that? You know, does that mean they are candidates who are not as, you know, who are not suited to you know, govern that particular constituency? So how does it work really?
You know, though I see an internal tension within your question, we've all been celebrating the potential of social media in democratizing media itself.
Absolutely.
So therefore, hopefully, a rickshaw puller with at least the support of a person could do a selfie and upload it across, theoretically.
Right.
But I take your point.
Right.
I still think the critical question is that the entire system is now geared towards a different kind of politics. So my point is that it's obviously uneven playing field, but what is also happening is that we are trying to build a politics where you largely have extremely rich people coming in. So it's also the changing nature of Indian democracy. From a representative democracy, we were never really a substantive democracy. We were never really into a participatory democracy. We are now moving towards a corporatist democracy. So all these conversations, so what I'm saying is we need to juxtapose this with the larger narrative of crony capitalism that we are looking at. And just look at the facts. In the 50s and 60s, political scientists would say that we still had stooges of the capitalist in the parliament. But say in the last 10 years, we've seen Anil Ambani sitting there, we have seen Vijay Mallya sitting there, and several other, we have Jindal sitting there. So you have already seen the capitalists already move on to these positions of power. So I feel extremely anxious, as I'm very grateful to Pranjay that he is talking about the transparency. I'm grateful that he talks of the civil society work, but I still think that the battle is far deeper, and it's a structural stumbling block that we need to overcome. Transparency will take us only to one extent, and beyond that, it's really how do we challenge the changed character of Indian democracy, which has become already a corporatist democracy. So in some time, people will not even question that rich people are coming. It's like the US, where you have to be a millionaire, billionaire to be actually...
Let me quickly get Anilji's views on this. A corporatized democracy, your views, sir. Can you hear me, Anilji?
Yeah, your voice is a little distorted. Please repeat the question.
Okay. I was just saying that Amitabh Behar talked of a democracy which is becoming more and more corporatized.
Yes, okay.
Yes, your views, sir.
That is one part what he's spoken about, but I would give you another interesting linkage to it, that the guys with more criminal cases against them are the richer ones.
Yes.
Apart from the industrialist and that variety, but what I am saying is, there is a direct linkage in that, and we did an analysis also of the chances of winning, and we found that the guys with more criminal cases against them, large amount of money with them, their chances of winning elections are double that of a guy with clean record. So there is definitely a linkage between the criminalization of politics and the role of money power, what our friend was talking about. So we need to look at that, and there is no question, there has to be a ceiling on the political parties' expenditure. There is no limit now. They can spend any amount. There is no regulation. I mean, whatever they submit after the elections are over, the political parties as well as the candidates, as you are aware, the candidates' limit has been increased from 40 to 70 lakhs. But even earlier, they were spending only 50 to 60% of that. And even now, the reports, when they come, you will find the same thing. They will never show that they have expended the 100%.
Right.
And this is what is the shown one. We don't know about how much is actually spent.
Right. Paranjada, let me just come to you now. Criminalization of politics, corporatization of politics, and they are the ones who are winning.
I completely agree with everything that has been said by Anilji and also Amitabh. I don't want to paint an excessively rosy picture of the situation.
Right.
Even if 40% of the members of parliament in the last 5 general elections have not been re-elected. So yes, we have very strong anti-incumbency sentiments also at work. But the problem of the criminalization of politics and the corporatization of politics, these are real and present dangers. If you ask me, what is the root, the fountainhead of corruption in India? It is this nexus. It is this nexus between corrupt business, between corrupt politics and crime and criminals. This is the nexus from which we see this is the root of all the so-called parallel economy, the black money that is generated. And as Mr. Anil has rightly pointed out, what is shown by the candidates is just a small fraction of the actual amount of money that is being spent.
Yes.
Some people every now and then they complain that the expenditure limit is too low, but they don't even spend the amount they are supposed to spend. And as he pointed out, the ADR study has showed they're spending barely half. So I think these are deep-rooted structural problems which are today having a very, very important impact on the working of Indian democracy. And Amitabh is absolutely correct. And let's look at what's happening today. The corporate sector has never so overtly supported and backed one candidate as the corporate sector has done
in these elections,
as far as Mr. Narendra Modi is concerned.
Yes.
And then look at the kind of huge amounts of money that are being spent. As Mr. Anil points out, there are no limits. the BJP can spend unlimited amounts of money to promote Mr. Narendra Modi's candidature. And you talked about the selfie and the social media. Yes. Let's not forget there's also a digital divide. How much of India is able to
But he
are
is
accessible
using that to
to the
connect
youth?
with the youth. He
So
is
yes,
using that
the
selfie to
urban
connect with the
youth,
youth.
the urbanized, the relatively affluent sections and the middle classes are today, yes, they have, they are accessing the internet, they have mobile phones have spread across the length and breadth of the country. They are almost like 7 mobile phones for every 10 Indians today. Yes,
Yes.
of course, the way in which, people are communicating, the politicians and political parties are communicating are also happening. But also look at the amount of money being spent on planting stories, paid news, sponsored programs. Interviews are given to only to particular people who ask goody questions. No tough questions are asked. So this is part of a bigger problem that we are seeing today, in which the abuse of money and the use of criminals has become really
Right.
rampant.
Amitabh, let me go to Amitabh now. The nexus between corrupt businesses and corrupt politics. And how do we really address it's a huge problem, as Paranjada just pointed out, as Anil, with statistics and facts. How do we really, what is the way out?
And can I just go now back to your first question?
Yes.
Uh, we've had this conversation, we've got the data,
Yes.
and now just juxtapose it with the poverty data in this country.
Right.
You have one Arjun Sen Gupta committee, I'm quoting all government data,
Yes.
which says that almost 78% of people live in this country with less than 20 rupees a day. The government of India itself says that at least 40%, and they're varying figures, but 28 to 45% are the government of India's planning commission estimates. Think of 78% people living with 20 rupees per day. And on the other hand, you have heard the figure from Anil,
Yes.
the people who are crorpatis and contesting. So the kind of divide that we're looking at in this democracy is absolutely phenomenal. And therefore, your question of criminalization, your question of corporatization,
And the nexus.
I think that's the root of ensuring that Indian democracy doesn't become substantive in nature, and it continues to only become a democratic exercise once in 5 years. So I think the task is actually about finding ways, which many of us in civil society are constantly doing, is how do you make democracy work every day? We all need to exercise our right to vote once in 5 years. But then there are several other occasions where we need to exercise our democratic rights. So whether it's a social audit, whether it's looking at the budgets, whether it's looking at the school management committees and so on, I think it's a long haul, but we need to build that democratic upsurge from the ground.
Anilji, let me ask you, these figures, these statistics basically come out during the elections, once every 5 years. What about, like Amitabh has just said, what about a consistent, you feed the people, you inform the people about what's happening, a consistency in data distribution, if I may. So that can probably, play a part in, reaching at the root of the problem.
There is an issue with your mic, I think. I can't hear clearly, but whatever I followed, I'll try to answer.
Yeah.
Our data is always there on the website. We keep continuously doing this analysis and putting out the data. Right now, once the results are announced, we are going to put out the data of all the winning candidates.
Right.
Then after that, once the government is announced, the ministers are announced, we are going to do the assets and criminal records of those guys and put it out. So, and this time there has been a tremendous response from the public. The number of mails and telephone calls and SMSs that we've got asking for details of the people who are contesting from various constituencies was phenomenal. We have seen 3 million hits on our, mynetainfo.com, which is, it's 10 times what it was in the last Lok Sabha. Of course, we are trying our best to enhance voter awareness and all. So maybe that is why the younger lot are very keen to know about their this thing, so that they can make an informed choice about the candidate.
All right. All right, Paranjada, let me just get, take your reaction on that. We talked of transparency, Anilji has just talked of how several people are logging into the website, several people are calling in with questions, which is in a way, do you see a balancing factor there where on one hand you have this problem which seems to be only increasing in terms of numbers, but also you have people who are wanting to make a more informed choice?
No, you have in a sense provided the answer to that question. You ask Amitabh, what's the way forward? How do you may not be able to completely break the nexus between business, politics, and crime overnight.
No.
But how do you deepen it? How do you ensure that it has a less of a pernicious influence on the working of the polity and democratic process of this country? The way forward is obviously greater awareness, greater public awareness,
Yes.
and that is the only way forward. That if more and more people become aware, educated about the way those who are standing for elections and even after the election, the way their elected representatives are acting. That
Yes.
is the only way you can move towards a system or a society which is not just more transparent, but also for holding accountable those who are in positions of power and authority, and you are holding them accountable so that they cannot or they are less prone to misusing their discretionary power, so that the government and the way the elected representatives work in a far more sort of transparent and accountable manner. That is the way forward.
Right.
Now, none of
All
it is
right.
going to happen overnight. Hopefully, by having conversations like the one you are having, by
Paranjada,
work that you are doing,
all
we are
right.
going to move ahead. That's all.
I'm running out of time, but thank you so much. You talked of greater public awareness, and you talked of a constant monitoring, a constant watch, so that we weaken the problem. Paranjada, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining on the conversation. Anilji, I would like to thank you as well for giving us those very important statistics and for also giving us hope informing us that more and more people are calling you, more and more people are logging into your site, and because they want to make an informed choice. Before I wrap up, Amitabh, final comments from you.
I would just say that we need many more ADRs. So thanks,
Thanks,
Anilji.
Anilji. Yes.
And we also need, I would say, I was earlier talking about building the democratic upsurge from the ground.
Yes.
That's absolutely critical.
Right.
But in a democracy, I think we also need extremely ambitious and maybe audacious attempts like AAP, which has shaken the roots of entrenched interest. So we do need many more of those. What we saw in the Delhi election.
45% of AAP candidates are crorepati's.
Okay, so but in the Delhi elections, when we looked at the assemblies, I don't know, Anilji could give the figures, but I do know a lot of those candidates, and they're certainly not crorepati's, and they're people who've been working on the ground. Right. And it's really not about the party-specific privileging that I'm doing. I'm talking about an audacious attempt which really challenges the entrenched nexus of capital and power.
All right. Thank you so much, Amitabh. Thank you so much for joining us on the conversation. We will carry on the conversation, www.indiapostlive.com, and don't forget to log in and play the game. It's called the Vote Race. We have elections going on. It's a staggered election. Please log in. Please play the game. It's very interesting. Please send us your tweets, #IndiaPostLive. Thank you for joining the conversation.